Picture this. It's the end of the month. You are sitting at your desk. The yard is finally quiet for once, and you've got all the reports printed out right in front of you.
Yeah, the classic month-end ritual.
Right. Spreadsheets are open on the monitor. You're looking at the diesel accounts, the revenue lines, the maintenance expenses, and on paper, you're doing everything right.
You're managing the fleet, you're tracking the data.
Exactly. But then you log into the banking portal and cash flow is just incredibly tight. Profit feels like, I don't know, this totally unpredictable roller coaster. And every single operational decision you make feels completely reactive, like you are literally just putting out fires all day.
It is a very familiar and deeply frustrating place
Yeah.
for any logistics business to be, especially here in South Africa. You have the
Yeah.
numbers, you're putting in the grueling hours, but there is this nagging feeling that something is just fundamentally off structurally.
Yeah, that's exactly what we are going to unpack in today's deep dive. We are looking at a recent industry white paper from Greystride, and it targets this exact disconnect for fleet owners.
It really does. And their core argument is simple, but profoundly challenging. They basically say that reviewing numbers is not the same as actually understanding your business.
Which, when you read it, it hits hard. Because looking at a spreadsheet of last month's fuel costs is, well, it's basically like looking at a thermometer when you were sick.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, because it tells you there is a fever, it gives you a very specific number, but a thermometer doesn't tell you why you're sick, and it definitely doesn't tell you how to cure it.
Spot on. And the white paper points out that this gap, the gap between reading the thermometer and actually diagnosing the disease, that's where so many South African fleet businesses quietly lose control.
They fall into what the source calls this illusion of control.
Exactly. Because gathering data feels productive, right? It feels responsible to capture all those receipts. You look at the spreadsheet and say, well, our fuel spend was exactly this amount last month.
But you are only seeing what happened. You are completely blind to why it happened.
Yes. Numbers on a page have absolutely no context on their own. Without context, they're just ink.
So most operators are essentially just staring at symptoms. Let's unpack the mechanism there. Because a fleet owner might look at a high fuel bill in their monthly review, sigh, and just write it off as the cost of doing business, especially with where pump prices are at right now.
Right. But without context, that high number could be pointing to a multitude of totally different operational failures. I mean, it could be terrible route planning on a specific corridor.
Or like a driver issue.
Absolutely. It could be excessive idling by drivers who are just waiting at a depot for hours. Or it might be an indicator that, 3 specific vehicles in your fleet have underlying mechanical issues, causing them to burn fuel inefficiently.
Wow, okay. But if you only look at the total aggregate spend across the whole fleet.
Then the real mechanical or operational issue just stays hidden inside that massive number. You never see it.
Man. Okay, I have to push back a little here, though, particularly on the revenue side of things.
Go for it.
If the revenue line is strong, if you are billing high numbers and keeping the trucks moving constantly, isn't that the ultimate goal? I mean, how could generating a ton of revenue actually be a bad thing for a transport business?
Strong revenue is a brilliant smokescreen. It really is. It masks poor cost control perfectly.
A smokescreen? How so?
Well, consider the math. Working harder and moving more loads doesn't mean the business is moving forward if hidden operational waste is silently eating the profit margins.
Ah, right. Because
Yeah.
of the margins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are generating massive revenue, but your margins are incredibly thin because, you aren't managing the underlying inefficiencies, you're essentially just moving money around for free.
You're wearing out your tires, putting immense mileage on your truck.
Exhausting your drivers,
Yeah.
taking on all the road risk, and the actual retained profit you keep at the end of the day is microscopic.
So you are basically running a very busy, high-risk charity at that point.
That is exactly what it is.
Which leads to the obvious question, right? Why does this happen? Why are incredibly smart, hardworking fleet operators missing this context and running their trucks into the ground for basically pennies?
The macroeconomic environment dictates daily behavior. In South Africa right now, the context is just brutal. Margins for logistics companies are razor thin.
Oh, absolutely.
You have diesel costs that are highly volatile. Imported parts are subject to massive exchange rate fluctuations. And at the exact same time, your customers are relentlessly pushing for lower rates. Everyone wants it faster and cheaper.
And so the cash flow is constantly under strain from all sides.
Yeah. And when cash flow is under that much strain, human psychology kicks in. The business just goes into pure survival mode. The owner's focus narrows down to the immediate horizon, just to keep the trucks moving.
Keep the wheels turning to generate the cash required just to pay Friday's wages, right?
Yeah.
And the upcoming fuel account.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Operators are just trying to keep their heads above water. So taking the time to, connect the dots or do deep strategic analysis, it feels like a luxury they simply can't afford.
They get trapped in this cycle of busyness.
The white paper actually refers to this as the monthly review degrading. Because of the constant pressure, the month-end review goes from being a strategic analysis session to just a frantic check-in.
Like just checking the bank balance.
Yeah, a quick glance to see if the balance covers the immediate liabilities. There is no time to step back and analyze the mechanics of the operation. And the critical warning here is that if you do not force yourself to step back, the exact same structural problems repeat month after month. The inefficiencies just compound.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we need to pivot to the solution. If the quick check-in is failing, we really have to look at what a meaningful business review actually entails. How do we move away from just staring at the thermometer?
A meaningful review connects financial performance directly to operational reality. It shifts the entire conversation from, what did we spend, to why did we spend it, and what specific action will improve it.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Greystride breaks this down into 5 core pillars. The first one is understanding profitability on a per-vehicle basis, rather than looking at the fleet as one giant entity.
Oh, I like that. It's almost like managing a sports team. You can't just look at the team's total score at the end of the season. You have to look at individual player statistics.
That is an apt comparison.
Like, if 2 trucks are constantly in the shop, they are basically the injured players dragging the salary cap down for the rest of the team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not all trucks contribute equally. When you aggregate your numbers, you hide the outliers. You might operate 10 trucks. 8 of them are carrying the business, running efficiently, and generating solid profit.
And the other 2?
2 of them are absolute lemons. They're constantly in the workshop. They consume way more fuel. They require specialized parts. And they are quietly eroding the profit that the other 8 are working so hard to build. But if you only look at the total fleet profit, you don't see the bleed.
Wow. So understanding profitability per vehicle would dictate your entire maintenance and replacement strategy. You figure out exactly when to stop throwing good money after a bad asset.
Precisely. But even if you have 10 perfectly tuned trucks, you still have to look at where you are sending them. Which brings us to the second pillar. The route and contract performance itself has to be scrutinized.
Right.
The core lesson here is that busy does not equal profitable. You might have a dedicated route that keeps your trucks on the road constantly, which satisfies that urge to keep moving.
Yeah, but
once you allocate the true costs of that specific route, the toll fees, the specific wear and tear from bad road conditions on that corridor, driver overtime from depot delays, that busy route might be generating almost zero return.
that is really easy to say in a boardroom, but out here in the South African logistics environment right now, work is hard to come by. If my trucks are parked in the yard, I am still paying the bank finance on them.
I hear that all the time.
Isn't a bad paying contract better than a truck sitting empty? Doesn't the owner have to keep moving just to service the debt?
It feels incredibly counterintuitive, but we have to do the math on that assumption. Your fixed cost is the bank finance. You pay that whether the truck moves or not.
Right.
But the moment you turn the key and send that truck on a bad paying route, you incur significant variable costs. Diesel, tire wear, servicing intervals, road risk.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If the rate for that load doesn't adequately cover those variable costs and contribute a margin toward your fixed costs, you aren't paying down your installment. You are actively subsidizing the client's transport costs out of your own pocket.
Wow. So you are accelerating the depreciation of the truck and increasing your risk exposure, all for a rate that actually drains your cash reserves faster than if the truck simply sat parked.
Exactly. Let's say you run the numbers on a specific route for a demanding client. You factor in a 4-hour waiting time at their loading bay, the destroyed tires from the dirt road approach, and the fact that you always return empty.
The dreaded dead leg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you realize you were actually losing 500 Rand every time you dispatch a vehicle there. Suddenly, that client is no longer an asset. They are a direct liability.
So when you see the true cost laid out mathematically, the decision to renegotiate the rate or just walk away entirely, it isn't driven by fear anymore.
No, it becomes the only rational choice to stop the bleeding.
You aren't losing revenue, you are plugging a leak.
Which brings us to the third pillar, the costs themselves. It's not enough to just know what was spent overall. We have to look at how those costs behave beneath the surface.
Cost behavior is about isolating the variables. What is fixed versus what is variable? What is controllable versus what is truly unavoidable? And most importantly, if a cost is increasing, what is the underlying operational mechanism driving it? But how do we actually differentiate the costs we can control from the ones we can't? Like diesel is a perfect example. The price at the pump is completely out of our hands.
The baseline price per liter is market influenced and unavoidable, yes. But the consumption rate, how
Yeah.
many liters are burned per 100 kilometers, is highly controllable.
Oh, okay.
If your fuel bill goes up, you need the data to show whether it was driven by a national price hike or because your drivers are idling for hours to keep the air conditioning running or shifting gears inefficiently. You cannot control a total number on a spreadsheet. You can only control the physical behavior driving that total.
That distinction changes how an owner manages their team. You stop yelling about the total fuel bill and start training drivers on specific shifting patterns.
Exactly.
But even if you optimize the routes and control the variable costs, you still hit the wall of cash flow. And in our context, that wall is brutal. We all know profit doesn't pay the bills, cash does. But the real friction in the South African market right now, and this relates to the fourth pillar, is the massive gap between payable terms and receivable terms.
The timing mismatch. That is where profitable businesses go bankrupt. A strong review maps out the payment cycles against the operational timing.
Because it's so skewed,
Like
Rob.
unbelievably skewed. In this industry, your diesel supplier might demand payment strictly in 30 days, or even 7 days for bulk drops. Your tires and parts suppliers want 30 days. But your broker or corporate client dictates 60 or 90-day payment terms from the date of statement.
It's wild. The logistics company is effectively acting as an unsecured, zero-interest bank for their massive corporate clients. They are funding the fuel and the labor up front and waiting a quarter of a year to get paid back.
Exactly. But by mapping this cash flow reality out with data, you can anticipate the pressure points before they arrive.
So you aren't completely blindsided.
Right. You aren't surprised when the bank account is dry on the 25th of the month. You saw the gap forming on the 1st, and you could proactively arrange bridging finance, negotiate early settlement discounts with the client, or restructure the debt covenants.
Okay, so what's the fifth pillar? We've got vehicle profitability, route margins, cost behaviors, and cash flow timing.
The final piece of this puzzle is taking all those financial realizations and translating them into operational efficiency on the ground.
This is where financial insights turn into physical, real-world improvements in the yard.
Yes. The numbers have to prompt operational questions. Are trucks standing too long waiting to be loaded because of poor scheduling? Are the loads truly optimized for weight and volume, or are we hauling dead weight?
Are we reducing our dead legs by collaborating with other operators?
Exactly. This is the bridge between the accountant's office and the dispatcher's desk.
Taking all of this into account, the Greystride material is essentially arguing for a fundamental change in how owners interact with their data. Like, looking at last month's data in isolation is basically like performing an autopsy.
That's a grim way to put it, but yeah.
Well, you were just trying to figure out why the business died or why the month was a disaster, but it is too late to change anything. But applying these 5 analytical pillars is like running a live MRI while the patient is still breathing. You can see the blockages forming in the arteries in real time, and you can intervene before the heart stops.
The transition from the autopsy to the live MRI is the defining characteristic of a resilient transport business. The fleets that survive and actually grow in South Africa's tough logistics environment aren't necessarily the ones with the newest European trucks or, the most aggressive sales teams.
Right.
They are the ones that use their data to predict and guide their operational decisions. They shift from merely recording historical data for the taxman to actively utilizing data as a steering wheel.
Because in today's environment, there's simply no margin left for desk work.
None. Small inefficiencies are no longer small. A truck idling for an extra hour a day, a dedicated route that is underpriced by 5%, a payment term that stretches 2 weeks too long. These seemingly minor mistakes become massively expensive almost overnight.
It's terrifying when you put it like that.
It is. The difference between a struggling fleet and a strong one comes down to how deeply the business is understood mechanically, not just how hard the owner works.
Which honestly should give permission to the fleet owner to stop feeling guilty that working 80 hours a week isn't yielding results. Working harder physically is not the answer. Understanding the mechanics deeply is the answer.
It provides clarity. Instead of feeling like you're constantly wrestling with your business, the business actually starts operating as a predictable machine.
It's about making the data speak directly to the physical operations, right? Creating a loop where financial analysis constantly improves real-world efficiency.
Spot on.
So, to bring this all together for you listening, you are likely sitting on an absolute goldmine of data right now in your own offices. The spreadsheets you frantically review at the end of the month, they actually hold the secrets to structural profitability. The goal isn't to spend more time reviewing more numbers. The goal is to use those numbers to find the narrative, to find the leaks, and to gain true confidence by applying these analytical mechanisms to your daily reality.
Couldn't agree more.
So we want to leave you with this. Think about your absolute best client right now, the one who is keeping your trucks the busiest, the one whose name is all over your dispatch board and who demands the most attention from your drivers. If you applied the principles we discussed today, specifically looking at true route profitability, variable cost destruction, and that 90-day cash flow gap, would they still be your biggest asset? Or would you discover that they are actually your most expensive liability cleverly disguised as revenue? It might be time to look at those numbers again, but this time, run the MRI. Ask why.